15 horror masterpieces every gamer must play. Let's go. Silent Hill 2 Remake. Silent Hill 2 Remake doesn't tell you anything, it just leaves you alone in a fog with fragments of a story that refuse to connect. What struck me was the silence, the weight of what wasn't said. Silent Hill 2 is a psychological horror game. It is a masterpiece in atmosphere, narrative, pacing, and the unshakable feeling of dread. When it is just a horror game, it's slow doom. Without giving too much away, and there's a lot to give away if you plan on experiencing the famously outstanding story without spoilers, Silent Hill 2's best levels are the ones in which the main character, James Sullivan, is cautiously walking around areas that are corrupted but could be encountered in real life. A rundown apartment building, a hospital at night, and a hotel barely visible in the fog are the best areas to make you feel uncomfortable at the idea of a place that's just strange turning into a place that's evil. Now once that place does turn evil, the wallpaper shreds off to show bloody rebar underneath, all the lights go out, etc. There's still opportunities to be unsettled, but the anticipation is done. Silent Hill 2 is constantly balancing the fear that you could be going to hell with the blunt fact that you've gone there and have to fight your way back out. Normally, in games where you're sent to a hellscape, you have the benefit of blowing up weaponry and super speed to mow down swarms of demons. In Silent Hill 2, you're still mainly ambling around corners with a big stick or a handgun, which means that aside from a few bosses, none of the enemies can be too nasty because you're not a superhero. Now, I just want to say that if you are looking for a horror game with a great and one of the most twisted narratives, Silent Hill 2 is the one you should check out. The story is downright depressing. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. So, picture this. The Resident Evil franchise was kind of in a weird spot. It had veered a little too far into action territory with 5 and 6, and fans were like, where's the horror, man? And then Capcom drops this on us. A first-person, terrifying as hell return to the series' roots. And honestly, it's amazing. First off, the shift to first-person was a bold move, but it totally paid off. You're not just watching Ethan Winters stumble into a nightmare. You are Ethan Winters. The game starts with him looking for his wife Mia, and oh boy, does that search spiral out of control fast. You end up trapped in this decrepit, disgusting plantation owned by the Baker family, who are, let's just say they make Hannibal Lecter look like your friendly neighborhood librarian. The atmosphere is straight up horrifying. The sound design is killer. Creaking floorboards, muffled voices, and the kind of ambient noise that makes you question every decision in life. And the Baker family, they're not just scary, they're unpredictable. You've got Jack Baker busting through walls like a southern fried horror Hulk, Marguerite with her terrifying bug obsession, and Lucas with his saw-like traps. It's tense, like edge of your seat, hand sweating on your controller tense. What makes RE7 so good is how it balances exploration, puzzles, and combat. It's got that classic Resident Evil vibe where you're constantly juggling keys, items, and ammo, but now it's in this deeply personal, intimate setting. Every corner of the Baker house tells a story, and oh man, some of those stories are gross. The level of detail is insane. Rotting food, blood-stained floors, creepy photographs, it all builds this incredible sense of dread. And the combat? Look, it's not an action game, but when you have to fight, it feels desperate. You've got limited ammo, and every encounter feels like a fight for survival. Oh, and let's talk about the molded for a second. Those creepy black goo monsters that slither out of walls. Yeah, they're the stuff of nightmares. The story's pretty wild too. It ties into the larger Resident Evil universe in ways you might not expect, especially toward the end. And speaking of the end, the DLC for this game is chef's kiss. It adds even more layers to the story and gives you a chance to face off with some of the Bakers in completely new ways. If you're into horror games that make you feel like you're trapped in a haunted house, where every shadow might hide something ready to kill you, Resident Evil 7 is a must-play. It's creepy, intense, and such a breath of fresh air for the series. This is the game that reminded everyone why Resident Evil is a household name in horror. The Outlast. But let's talk about Outlast. This is one of those games that doesn't waste time. It throws you straight into a nightmare and never lets you breathe. Released by Red Barrels, it's a first-person survival horror game where you're armed with nothing but a camcorder and sheer willpower. No guns, no weapons, just you, a flashlight, and the absolute dread of what's lurking around every corner. You play as Miles Upshur, an investigative journalist who makes the very bad decision to explore Mount Massive Asylum. The place is a complete hellhole, full of mutilated bodies, deranged patients, and this oppressive atmosphere that feels like it's going to crush you. The camcorder is your lifeline. It's got night vision, but the battery drains fast, so you're always on edge, scavenging for spares while praying nothing jumps out of the dark. The game is relentless. It's not about fighting back, it's about running, hiding, and surviving. The asylum feels alive in the worst way possible. The sound design ramps up the tension to unbearable levels with distant screams, heavy breathing, and footsteps echoing through the halls. It makes you question every decision, every turn, every step forward. The enemies in this game don't just chase you, they haunt you. The way they stalk you, how they burst into rooms and search every corner makes every encounter unforgettable. The game's pacing is brutal with barely any moments to catch your breath. It's just constant pressure pushing you closer to the edge. Outlast is all about the psychological horror. It knows how to mess with your mind. The story, revealed through documents and environmental storytelling, digs into unethical experiments, mental illness, and the blurred lines between humanity and monstrosity. It's disturbing in a way that sticks with you long after the credits roll. This is a pure horror experience. It doesn't rely on cheap tricks or over-the-top gore. The fear comes from how vulnerable you are, how oppressive the atmosphere is, and how relentless the game feels from start to finish. Outlast is a masterclass in survival horror, and it's a game every horror fan should experience at least once. Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Alright, so let's talk about Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Man, this game is the real deal when it comes to horror. Frictional Games dropped this one back in the day, and it absolutely set the standard for psychological horror. This isn't just about scares, it's about getting in your head and making you question every step you take. You play as this guy named Daniel, who wakes up in a creepy castle with no memory of who he is or why he's there. Right away you know something's wrong. The atmosphere just hits you. The castle is dark, decrepit, and every corner feels like it's hiding something horrible. And yeah, there's a lot of horrible stuff lurking around. Here's the thing about Amnesia: you can't fight back. No guns, no weapons, nothing. All you can do is hide, run, or hope the monsters don't see you. It makes you feel so vulnerable, and that's where the tension comes from. Every noise, every shadow, it all feels like a threat. The game's sanity mechanic is pure genius. If you stay in the dark too long, Daniel starts losing it. Like hallucinations, whispering voices, distorted visuals. It's not just scary, it's stressful, but in a good way. The sound design is what makes this game next level. The creaks, the footsteps, the distant screams, all of it works together to keep you on edge. The castle feels alive in the worst way possible. Every hallway, every room has this oppressive vibe, like it's closing in on you. It's just constant dread. The story unfolds slowly, and oh man, it gets dark. You piece it together through journal entries and flashbacks, and by the time you figure out what's going on, you're already in way too deep. It's not just a scary game, it's disturbing. It sticks with you. Amnesia: The Dark Descent is one of those games that doesn't need flashy effects or over-the-top gore. It's all about the atmosphere and the psychological horror. It gets under your skin and stays there. If you're into horror games and somehow missed this one, it's a must play. Just be ready, this one doesn't let up. Dead Space. This game is the blueprint for sci-fi horror done right. It came out back in 2008, and even today, it holds up so well that it's almost unfair. You've got this perfect mix of creepy atmosphere, brutal combat, and that constant feeling like something's about to go very wrong. It's not just a classic, it's a game that keeps showing up on best of lists for a reason. So you play as Isaac Clarke, an engineer who's sent to fix a busted spaceship, the USG Ishimura. But of course, it's never that simple. The ship is a total nightmare, dark corridors, flickering lights, blood everywhere, and oh yeah, the place is swarming with necromorphs, which are like these horrific reanimated corpses that don't just want to kill you, they want to tear you apart. It's a lot. The combat in Dead Space is what makes it so special. It's not just about aiming for the head like a typical shooter. You've got to strategically dismember these things, take out their legs so they can't charge you, or their arms so they can't rip you in half. Every encounter feels like a puzzle, and it's so satisfying when you figure it out. The weapons are all improvised tools like the plasma cutter, and they're just as creative as they are deadly. But honestly, the atmosphere is the real star here. The sound design is some of the best ever. You hear whispers in the distance, the hiss of something crawling through a vent, or the sudden thud of a necromorph dropping from the ceiling. It keeps you constantly on edge, like you can't trust anything around you. And the Ishimura itself, the ship is basically a character. It feels alive, but in the worst way. The story is another reason why this game hits so hard. It's not just about surviving the necromorphs, it's about uncovering what went wrong, dealing with this creepy cult-like religion called Unitology, and watching Isaac slowly lose his grip on reality. There's a lot of heavy stuff going on, and the game nails the pacing so you're always hooked. The zero gravity sections and stasis mechanics add even more layers to the gameplay, breaking up the tension with some really clever puzzles and moments that make you feel like you're truly in space. It's the kind of thing that keeps the game feeling fresh even when you're hours in. Dead Space is one of those rare games that gets everything right. The horror, the gameplay, the story, it all comes together so perfectly. If you're into sci-fi horror or just horror in general, this is a masterpiece that absolutely deserves your time. It's intense, it's scary, and it's unforgettable. Layers of Fear. This one isn't your typical horror game. It's not about fighting monsters or running from jump scares. It's more like stepping into a twisted art gallery that's determined to mess with your head. It's weird, it's creepy, and it's such a unique horror experience that it just sticks with you. You play as a tortured painter trying to finish his masterpiece, but it's not just about painting, it's about unraveling his shattered mind, his troubled past, and the chaos of his life. The house you're exploring is basically an extension of his psyche. It's constantly shifting, twisting and changing, almost like the game is gaslighting you. You walk down a hallway, you turn around, and suddenly everything's different. It's unnerving in the best way. The atmosphere in Layers of Fear is next level. The visuals are stunning with this gothic Victorian vibe that's so rich in detail. Every room is packed with clues, little details, and unsettling art that makes you feel like something's watching you. And oh man, the sound design, distant whispers, creaking floors, and music that just builds and builds until it feels like your chest is going to explode. It's intense. What makes this game so memorable is how it messes with your perception. It's psychological horror at its core. The scares aren't about something jumping out at you, though there's definitely some of that, but more about the way the game manipulates your surroundings. It keeps you guessing, keeps you uncomfortable, and it just never lets you feel safe. The story is layered, no pun intended, and it's all about piecing together what happened to this guy and his family. It's dark, tragic, and honestly kind of heartbreaking. You find bits of his life through notes, paintings, and other environmental details, and it's one of those narratives that hits harder the more you uncover. The pacing is perfect for a game like this. It's short, maybe 5 or 6 hours, but it's all killer, no filler. It's like a really intense ride that doesn't overstay its welcome. By the time the credits roll, you're left sitting there thinking about everything you just experienced. Layers of Fear isn't for everyone. It's slow, it's deliberate, and it's all about soaking in the atmosphere and unraveling the story. But if you're into psychological horror and you want a game that plays with your mind, this one's an absolute must-play. It's haunting, beautiful, and deeply unsettling in a way that's hard to forget.
That should not
be. Alien Isolation. This one is the real deal when it comes to survival horror in space. If you're a fan of the original Alien movie, this game is basically a love letter to everything that made that film a classic. It's terrifying, it's intense, and it's so faithful to the source material that it feels like you're stepping right into the universe Ridley Scott created. You play as Amanda Ripley, Ellen Ripley's daughter, and you're trying to uncover the truth about what happened to your mom. The game throws you onto Sevastopol, a giant space station that's falling apart. The atmosphere is thick, low lights, creepy corridors, and that old school sci-fi sci-fi aesthetic that nails the vibe of the original movie. It feels retro and futuristic at the same time, like a perfect recreation of 1979's vision of space. The star of the show, though, is the Xenomorph. Oh man, this thing is terrifying. It's not just a mindless enemy. It learns, it adapts, and it's always hunting you. It's smart, it'll hear you, see you, and even smell you if you're not careful. You can't kill it, so the entire game becomes this nerve-wracking game of cat and mouse. You're hiding in lockers, under tables, and holding your breath as it stalks right past you. It's relentless, and it makes every encounter feel like life or death. The gameplay is all about survival. You've got tools like a motion tracker, but that thing is a double-edged sword. Sure, it tells you where the Xeno is, but the sound it makes, it's loud enough to draw attention. You've got to scavenge for supplies, craft distractions, and pray that whatever you're doing doesn't get you killed. The tension is unreal, and it's not just the Xenomorph you're dealing with. The station is crawling with hostile androids and desperate survivors. Each threat feels distinct, and the game does a great job of keeping you on your toes. It's not just scary, it's stressful in the best way. The story ties so well into the Alien universe without feeling forced. It respects the original while carving out its own space, and Amanda Ripley is such a great character to follow. By the time the credits roll, you're left feeling like you just survived something truly horrifying. The SOMA. The setup is wild. You're Simon, a guy who wakes up in this underwater research facility called Pathos 2, and everything is just wrong. The place is falling apart, robots are acting weird, and the ocean is creeping in from every angle. The atmosphere is so thick you could cut it with a knife. The game doesn't hit you with jump scares, it's more about this slow, creeping dread that builds as you explore and figure out what the hell happened. The big thing about SOMA is its story. It's not just a survival horror game, it's a deep dive into what it means to be human, consciousness, and identity. The way it explores these themes is so well done. You're constantly finding audio logs, notes, and having conversations with characters or robots that make you question everything. It's the kind of story that leaves you staring at the screen after the credits roll, just sitting there thinking, what would I do in that situation? Gameplay-wise, it's all about exploration and stealth. There's no combat. You're dealing with creepy enemies that you have to avoid, and they're terrifying. Each encounter feels unique. Some enemies react to sound, some rely on sight, and all of them feel like they're breathing down your neck. The sound design here is unreal. The way water creaks through the facility, the muffled roars of something lurking nearby, and the way the music swells at just the right moments, it all works together to keep you on edge. And that underwater setting, it's gorgeous in the most unsettling way. The visuals are bleak but beautiful, with these deep sea environments that feel alien yet grounded in reality. The mix of decaying machinery, glowing monitors, and pitch-black ocean outside the windows is just so immersive. It's like you're really there, trapped in this isolated, claustrophobic nightmare. But what makes SOMA really special is how it balances the horror with its narrative. It's not just scary, it's meaningful. The game doesn't just throw monsters at you for the sake of it. Everything feels intentional, like it's building towards something bigger. And when you get to the end, oh man, it's one of those endings that just hits like a truck. Until Dawn. Until Dawn is like playing through one of those classic teen slasher movies, and it's a total blast. You've got a group of friends heading to a creepy mountain lodge for a fun weekend, but things go downhill fast. The night turns into a nightmare, and you're the one deciding who makes it out alive, or who doesn't. What makes this game so cool is the way your choices actually matter. Every little thing you do, what you say, where you go, how fast you react, can completely change the story. It's stressful in the best way, because one bad move could mean someone's gone for good. The characters feel real too. They're played by actual actors like Rami Malek and Hayden Panettiere, and they really bring their roles to life. Sure, they start out as classic horror stereotypes, but as things get intense, you start to care about what happens to them.
What are you doing out there?
A beautiful bathing boat.
The setting is perfect for horror. You've got dark forests, creepy cabins, and just enough jump scares to keep you on edge. But it's not all mindless terror. The story throws in some big twists that'll keep you guessing right up to the end. Until Dawn is short, intense, and perfect for anyone who loves a good scare. It's not just a game, it's like directing your own horror movie, and it's so much fun to see how everything plays out. The Evil Within. The Evil Within is the kind of game that grabs you by the throat right from the start. It's dark, it's intense, and it's filled with that twisted, messed up horror vibe that only Shinji Mikami, the guy behind Resident Evil 4, can pull off. If you're into survival horror that's more about fighting through your fear than running from it, this one's for you. You play as Detective Sebastian Castellanos, who gets pulled into this creepy, nightmarish world while investigating a murder at a mental hospital. It's not just spooky, it's straight up disturbing. The environments feel like they're alive, constantly shifting and throwing you into one horrifying situation after another. One minute you're sneaking through blood-soaked hallways, and the next you're running from some unholy abomination that looks like it crawled out of your worst dreams. The gameplay is classic survival horror, but with a brutal edge. You've got limited ammo, so every bullet counts, and the enemies are relentless. The game forces you to think on your feet. Do you fight or do you run? The stealth system gives you some breathing room, but it's never enough to make you feel safe. And those traps, they're everywhere, and they're deadly. The art style is super grim with this gritty, almost dreamlike quality that makes everything feel off. It's not just about what you see, but how the game makes you feel, constantly keeping you on edge with its eerie sound design and unpredictable pacing. The bosses are insane, grotesque, horrifying monsters that are as challenging as they are terrifying. The story is a bit of a mind bender. It's not super straightforward, but it's all about piecing things together as you go. It leans hard into psychological horror, messing with your perception of what's real and what isn't. It's the kind of thing that keeps you thinking about it long after you're done. The Evil Within is brutal, unsettling, and absolutely worth playing if you love horror that pushes you out of your comfort zone. It's not for the faint of heart, but if you're up for the challenge, it's one heck of a ride. Visage. The game puts you in this big, empty house that's anything but safe. It's dark, it's quiet, and it feels like something's watching you the whole time. The house isn't just a setting, it's the heart of the game. Every room tells a story, and those stories, they're messed up in the best way possible. The gameplay is all about exploration and survival. There are no weapons, no combat. You're just trying to stay sane while dealing with some really freaky stuff. The sanity meter is brutal. Lights flicker, shadows move, and the atmosphere keeps getting heavier the longer you stay in the dark. It feels like the house itself is trying to break you. What makes Visage so special is how it builds tension. It's not packed with jump scares. Instead, it's all about the slow, creeping dread that makes you afraid to take the next step. The sound design is insane. Every little creak, whisper, and distant thud keeps you on edge. And the visuals? Gorgeous in the most horrifying way. The house is so detailed, and every little thing adds to the story and the atmosphere. The game doesn't hold your hand either. You're thrown into this house with little direction, and it's up to you to figure out what's going on. It's challenging but rewarding, especially as you piece together the tragic stories of the people who lived there. Phasmophobia.
Did you see that?
Phasmophobia is an absolute gem for anyone who loves co-op horror. It's one of those games that feels like it shouldn't work as well as it does, but man, when you get a group of friends together, it's pure chaos and it's terrifying. The setup is simple but brilliant. You and your team are ghost hunters armed with a bunch of equipment, heading into haunted locations to figure out what kind of spirit is lurking there. You've got tools like EMF readers, spirit boxes, and even a thermometer to track supernatural activity. But the twist? The ghost is out there with you, and it's not messing around. The game's atmosphere is killer. These haunted houses, schools, and asylums are so dark and quiet that every little creak or whisper will make your heart skip a beat. The lighting and sound design are spot on, with every flicker of a light or distant footstep sending shivers down your spine. What really makes Phasmophobia shine is how unpredictable it is. The ghost's behavior changes every time you play, so no two hunts feel the same. One minute you're cracking jokes with your friends, and the next you're screaming because the ghost slammed a door and started hunting. The voice recognition system is also super cool. Saying the ghost's name or taunting it actually gets its attention, which is both hilarious and terrifying. The best part? The game nails that balance of fun and fear. It's scary enough to keep you on edge, but playing with friends makes it such a blast. blast. You'll have moments of pure panic like when the ghost appears out of nowhere, but you'll also be cracking up as your team tries, and usually fails, to keep it together. Phasmophobia is one of the best co-op horror games out there. It's creepy, it's unpredictable, and it's perfect for late night gaming sessions with friends. Just don't forget to bring your flashlight and maybe an extra pair of pants. The Medium. The Medium is a game about a woman named Marianne who can see two worlds at the same time, the real world and a strange ghostly world. She's called to an abandoned resort called Niwa, a place full of dark secrets and strange memories, to figure out why she keeps having visions. The way the game works is really cool. Sometimes you see both worlds at once, one on each side of the screen. In the real world, the resort is quiet and broken, but in the ghost world, it's creepy and full of strange, floating shapes and things that don't feel right. You have to use both worlds to solve puzzles and uncover what happened to the people who were there. The game doesn't have fights or big action scenes. Instead, it's all about exploring and finding clues. The spirit world feels uncomfortable, and there's always this quiet fear that something might happen. The music is soft and creepy, making you feel even more nervous as you go deeper into the resort. The story is slow and takes its time, but it's really interesting. It's about things like loss and pain, and it makes you think about the people you meet along the way. By the time it ends, you feel like you've been through a lot with Marianne. If you like games where you explore, solve puzzles, and enjoy a good story, The Medium is a really special experience. It's quiet, different, and perfect for a slow, spooky evening. Martha is Dead.
I need...
Martha is Dead is a dark and emotional game that feels like a mix of a mystery and a scary dream. It's set in Italy during World War II, and you play as Julia, a young woman trying to figure out what really happened after her twin sister, Martha, is found dead. This game is all about the story. It's slow, quiet, and full of moments that make you stop and think. You explore the countryside, your family's house, and other places, finding clues and piecing together the truth. The game doesn't shy away from tough or disturbing topics, so it's definitely not for everyone. One thing that stands out is how real everything feels. The world is detailed, and the way the game mixes beauty with sadness is really powerful. You'll hear soft music, birds chirping, or a calm breeze, but at the same time, you feel like something isn't right. The atmosphere is heavy, and it keeps you on edge the whole time.
She may not.
The gameplay is simple. You mostly walk around, find items, and interact with things to learn more, but the way the game tells its story makes it special. It's full of twists, and you're never sure what's real and what isn't. It's not about action or puzzles, it's about how it makes you feel as you uncover more of the story. Martha is Dead isn't a happy game. It's sad, unsettling, and can be pretty intense. But if you like story-driven games that stick with you, it's worth checking out. Just be ready for some heavy moments. It's a game that doesn't hold back.
to make that pain go away.
Alan Wake 2. This sequel goes deeper, darker, and way scarier than the first game. If you loved the mystery and weirdness of the original Alan Wake, this one takes it to a whole new level. The story picks up years after the first game. Alan is still stuck in the creepy dark place, and now there's a new character, Saga Anderson, an FBI agent investigating strange murders. Their stories run side by side, and you switch between them as the mystery unfolds. It's all connected, but the game makes you work to figure out how. What makes Alan Wake 2 stand out is its atmosphere. The game is drenched in shadows, with thick forests, creepy small-town streets, and the kind of lighting that makes everything look like it's straight out of a nightmare. The dark place feels alive and dangerous, always shifting and messing with your head. The gameplay is slower and more tense than the first game. You've got limited resources, so every bullet counts, and the enemies are relentless. It's not just about shooting, it's about surviving. You're constantly looking for light sources to keep the darkness away, which keeps the tension high. The game also leans heavily into storytelling, with pages from Alan's manuscripts and Saga's case notes adding layers to the mystery. It's a game that rewards you for paying attention, with little clues and details scattered everywhere. Alan Wake 2 is scarier, smarter, and more cinematic than the first game. It's a perfect mix of survival horror and psychological thriller, with a story that pulls you in and doesn't let go. If you're into games that feel like a good mystery novel come to life, this one's an absolute must play.
There's something I'm forgetting. Something important.
The Inside. Inside is a quiet, strange, and unforgettable game. You play as a young boy running through a dark and creepy world. The game doesn't tell you what's going on, you figure it out as you go. That makes it even more interesting because everything feels like a mystery. The world you explore is cold and scary, there are weird machines, dangerous people, and moments that make you stop and wonder what's really happening. It's not a happy place, but it pulls you in because you want to see what's next. The puzzles in Inside are smart but easy to follow. You move things, figure out how to get past traps, and even use strange powers to control other characters. It never feels too hard, and solving each one makes you feel clever. The sounds are a big part of what makes it so good. There's no big music or loud effects, just quiet footsteps, the hum of machines, and other little noises that make the world feel alive and scary. And the ending is wild. It's the kind of thing that leaves you thinking about it long after you finish. It's weird, it's surprising, and it doesn't explain everything, which makes it even better. Inside is short, you can finish it in a few hours, but it's full of moments that stick with you. If you like games that feel like a strange story you can't stop thinking about, this one's perfect.